There we go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to. I guess we're going to do a movie review. I'm not sure. I haven't decided what we're calling this, and so we're not going to call it anything yet. But I have the Midnight Citizen here with me, and also the brains behind Mike's Bonfire at Substack.com. I should throw these things up here. Midnight Citizen, and you can catch him there at the _ Midnight Citizen podcast to talk about AI,
Yeah,
artificial intelligence.
the coming revolution.
Yeah, yeah. But the funny thing is, this revolution started. The movie was in 2001. Did you know that?
No, I saw that movie in the theater. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah, isn't that wild? It's been that long ago.
Yeah, and it feels like it was a long time ago, but I remember not liking that movie like at all. And I've got people who keep on telling me like go back and watch it. I just I don't jibe well with like intentionally sad movies that are just designed to literally make you like destroy your spirit. Like I like crying at movies, but like not in a way that makes me feel like just all is lost, like that movie did at the end. If you remember the movie, where it's just years in the future, and it turns out that like, you know, if you give AI long enough, it'll develop a soul and feelings, and and it just made me think of like all the old toys that are stowed away in a storage unit somewhere.
It's kind of like a Toy Story for the the sentient age, I suppose. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
How you would call it, because Toy Story supposedly they're alive as well, but it's a little bit different in its take. So
I know it sounds kind of ridiculous linking, you know, AI to toys, which are inanimate and always will be. AI is a different thing, but I guess what I'm saying is that at the end of that movie, it just made me feel like at the end of Toy Story, only sad rather than like happy, you know.
Right.
So, it has nothing to do at all with what the point that you were getting at.
Well, here, let me read the I would always use TV Guide synopsis. We'll just say synopsis and leave out the TV Guide part. A highly advanced robotic boy longs to become real. Sounds Pinocchio-like, so that he can regain the love of his human mother. So there you go.
Yeah, that sounds.
It's got a lot. I mean, that line alone has a lot of connotation and intonations of many other works of creative endeavor.
Yeah.
I was thinking, you know, tonight as I pulled it up here to look at it, I'm like, I don't remember it being that long title of AI, artificial intelligence. I always remember it just being called AI.
Yeah, no. There were the logo, as I can remember it, was, you know, AI with Haley Joel Osment's little, you know, profile, Alfred Hitchcock into the letter I.
Yeah,
and under that was like, on some trailers was artificial intelligence. And,
I guess so.
I
don't remember that though. I don't remember the full thing, but I guess at that point in time, people needed it because it wasn't as common a term that everybody threw around. Like the poor lady who said A1 recently in the government, the political sphere.
Oh, the people who are actually in charge of regulating it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nothing better.
Yeah.
Than showing our ineptitude.
Yeah, at that time, like, you know, when people threw around the term AI, it was generally to talk about Terminator 2, but these are only like the hardcore Terminator fans,
right?
Talk about AI, as well as, you know, the Matrix.
Right.
Artificial intelligence is mentioned very heavily in the movie The Matrix, but it's only really identified at one point in that movie when Morpheus is, you know, telling Neo about, you know, how we marveled at our accomplishments at the end of the 20th century as we gave birth to AI. And so it's, you know, obviously you can't watch that movie without knowing that that's the whole cause for the Matrix. But it's just not mentioned explicitly, you know, within that. So now when everybody talks about AI and the dangers of AI, it's always like as not the movie, but like the actual thing, AI, LLM. It's
Right.
always like proceed, or forwarded by the Matrix. It's like, I'm afraid we're going to have a Matrix situation or a Terminator situation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, now we can leave that behind and just say AI.
Yeah. So, I'm having kind of a funny moment here because like when you emailed me a couple weeks ago and you're like, do you want to, review a movie or you want to talk about movies? I was like, yeah, I guess we could. And you said like, what do you want to talk about? Because I just finished seeing 2001, which is a lot about AI. And I said, well, we could talk about 2001 or AI. And I meant just the actual thing, artificial intelligence, not the actual movie. This is a movie I have not thought about in 25 years until you started mentioning it.
I thought it was prescient. I thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea, because we're living. I've been talking to people, about AI in our current tense, right, in current times, and I'm like, we're getting the hard sell, right? We're getting the hard sell for AI.
Yeah.
That's what everybody is getting right now. It's like it can do everything. It can, it waxes, it's a floor polish, it's a vegetable cleaner, it's a dessert topping, it's all these things. And the reality is it's not yet.
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow. And I just interpreted your note to mean, oh, that movie AI. Well, that's kind of really interesting because it all meshes with what's happening today. And, where everybody's promising all these things that AI is going to do for us. Like this movie, we were past the point of the promises into the point of it's kind of old hat, right?
Right.
It's so familiar that we don't care.
Right.
And that's where the movie is. And so it's kind of interesting, also in relation to 2001, for that matter. And the fact that AI was made in 2001 is also a revelation, because I just noticed that tonight.
Yeah, and the two are connected because it was a movie that Kubrick had worked on for years.
Right.
But yeah, 2001, and then Spielberg, they were buddies, took it over for him. And Kubrick, it's interesting because if Kubrick wanted to make AI, like the movie, I don't think it would have been as whimsical, as glowy, as kind-hearted as the movie that Spielberg ended up making.
Right. Yeah, he Spielberged it up.
Yeah, but I think like it would have represented a bit of a change in tone for Kubrick, because that's the interesting thing. Like when you watch 2001, you can watch that movie incredibly in different ways. You can look at it as Kubrick being a lot more cynical about where human beings are going. Or you can look at it and you're like, well, this is a guy who just made Dr. Strangelove, where he literally blows up the world at the end of the movie.
Right.
And this is a hopeful, 2001 is hopeful. So Kubrick, I think, liked to play around with that idea of taking the same kind of subject matter and looking at it in both sunlight and, shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like with 2001, I think it would have still had that feeling and that intent of showing that man and machine, or whatever we invent, we can live and we can use it and we can live side by side, but we cannot have any illusions of the fact that it will develop some sort of neural learning mind of its own that we have to cope with in some way. So we can either be really mean and aggressive toward it, or we can treat it as a slave, or we can nurture it and, hopefully work alongside it and coexist by it. But I still think, though, that point where we have to really make those decisions is still a long way off, because really I think we call AI today is really just machine learning. It's a essentially a closed system that we're feeding into, that is not to that point yet where we're going to create these like, twee little kids who want to play hide and seek with you.
Right. Yeah.
So
the prepubescent Haley Joel Osments of the world.
Exactly.
Can be your buddy.
Who will never get old and never, get DUIs and racial epithets of police officers.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Make bad movies.
Well, right.
Yeah, it is it interesting, but I mean, you know, like I mentioned, that we're in the hard sell. Everybody wants you to get on board, and it's
Mhm.
all coming. And if you're not on board, you're going to be left behind. And you know, there's been so many iterations of this hard sell um, over our lives that this is just the next iteration of that. And
Yeah.
but it's interesting to me for the movie in the sense that you know it's beyond all that, and where it's almost like they're garbage. They're walking garbage.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
They again, they're just these things that we buy and they sort of serve their purpose. And then
Right.
uh,
Disposable.
we send them out and we cast them out, but they're still sentient. They still have this like, you know, desire. And I mean, I think probably the best science fiction movie that's been made since AI. And it was not a good science fiction movie, but a lot of people disagree with me because there are a lot of people who love that original, you know, AI from 2001. But the
Mhm.
best science fiction movie that's been made on the subject, really, of artificial intelligence is probably Wally.
Wally,
You
yeah.
know, and this is a movie again that I saw when it came out, and I resisted seeing it for many years because that movie, I seem to have this memory that it made me really, really just cry, like melt into like a ball of tears. That movie, 'cause I thought that it was like a very negative ending. It's not. It's not a negative ending. It's a beautiful ending. The whole movie is really beautiful because the idea of Wally is that it opens very sad, you know, because like Wally is just
Right.
this, like little machine. He's like the last machine left on Earth,
Mhm.
and his task is basically just to clean. And
Mhm.
he's been given that he's a perpetual motion machine that just lives and like you know, on the fuel of the garbage that he collects. And
Mhm.
it's been so long that he's been on this earth. It's been long evacuated by mankind, and they are going up to a spaceship and living on the spaceship up there. Um,
Right.
it's been so long since he's had anybody there to kind of give him directions or revise his program or modify him or anything, that he's actually starting to develop a sense of creativity and a sense of curiosity. Um,
Mhm.
you know, and this is the thing. It's like if you have this machine that just has a program and it has some kind of a neural net, a way of like, you know, modifying itself as it goes to modify its tasks and everything. You know, and I don't know if this is how it's actually going to go, but the argument that movie makes is that like you can't just make this thing and just leave it. You know, it's going to sooner or later you know, latch on to some kind of curiosity or some kind of a desire to learn more about its, you know, creators. And so this whole idea that Wally is going out all day long and he's collecting this garbage, and he sees like little pieces of creativity and art around him, and he brings it
Mhm.
back to him every single day, back to his like place where he turns himself off for the day and sleeps.
Mhm.
And eventually this, you know, this kind of thing, it fuels him to, you know, get up to space, to, you know, through a series of, you know, accidents. Essentially he
Yeah.
spaceship.
And Eve was looking for
Eve, yeah,
life.
of course. Eve is looking for life, and you know, Wally, because he's like kind of attracted to Eve, and not
Mhm.
necessarily in the romantic sense, but just in like the curiosity sense of like, this represents some kind of like beauty, this represents some kind of art, you know.
Right. I mean,
Wally,
she's streamlined. She's, you
mhm,
know, the future.
exactly. And
He's
so
a little block.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, that movie is just like such a beautiful representation of this idea that like, you know, we create these machines and we have to take responsibility for them. We can't just like, you know, leave them and sort of like just assume that they're going to not have any kind of response whatsoever to what we do to them, you know.
Yeah,
But
well, and that's interesting because, and when as you're talking about all this, what comes to mind, and this goes in the other direction, is there's a movie called Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin,
yes, yeah, yeah,
and Wally is Chaplin in Modern Times. He's a little worker, and he has to do his work, right? And he gets no joy, and eventually he's going to have to find joy in order to be a whole person,
yeah.
because you can't just be a worker. And so it's a theme that is so old, right? Even the AI thing, he's the you know, Haley Joel Osment is trying to find wants to regain the love of his human mother. He wants to find this joy in life after being kind of, cast aside, as it were.
Right.
And same thing with Wally. Wally's doing his bit, and then he's like, well, this can't be everything.
Yeah.
But it's all the same.
Oh yeah.
Same vein. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Modern Times is such a great movie because there's that classic scene where Charlie Chaplin is working all day long and just doing the same rote task over and over again.
Mhm.
Steps away to go to the bathroom, he literally cannot stop himself. He can't.
Right.
Just is the machine. He's just in that
He's
mode. I know,
Yeah.
and that's one of those things that I was noticing. A couple weeks ago, I went and saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's probably like the 15th or 20th time I've seen that movie. And I went and saw it on the big screen at the theater that we have here in town. And that's every time I watch that movie, it's just amazing because I notice or I take in something new about it. And the fascinating thing about like what happens when they're on the spaceship at the end of that movie, when they're on their way to where are they on?
Io.
Venus, yeah, or Jupiter, excuse me.
Jupiter, and they're going to the moon Io.
Yeah,
Jupiter.
Exactly. And you got David Bowman and Frank Poole, and they're two guys who literally cannot separate themselves from the machine. They for all intents and purposes are a machine, even though they're like organic. Like Hal is a part of them and they are a part of Hal. And so everything that they do, just like Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, is just like linked to some machine, and to the point where they really don't have any kind of real identity of their own that's real human. And I think it was really fascinating because David Bowman is the one who is essentially allowed to live in that movie,
right?
And he's the one that represents, he shows this spark of creativity and the spark of like divine, the spark of the divine or whatever. He's going around and he's like using art, he's like sketching pieces of the spaceship and everything. And I think it's just it's one of those things like where there's always this conversation about like where's like the importance of art, especially as they strip out or they slightly diminish liberal arts programs.
Yeah.
I'm a part of right now, is this idea that like, why do you really need to go to school to like learn art? Well, it's like you need to, when you're done doing the science and the engineering and the math all day long, you need to be able to kind of like have some sort of human interpretation as to why you're doing all of it, like
right.
Human responsibility, for it. So
it's an outlet. So I think people, this gets deep already, Mike. We're jumping into the deep.
I know I've gotten pretty deep. I'm sorry.
So I would say I believe there is some, research behind this. So people who don't have creative outlets turn to addictive outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then that's why you have all this addiction, because people don't know how to burn off this, creative need, I think sometimes. And so, what's better to do? Oh, I don't want to write a play. That's too hard. I'd rather just smoke some weed or drink a bunch of beer or, or huff a bunch of gasoline and I'll feel great.
Yeah.
And not that I'm down on any of those, activities.
Huffing gasoline. You're okay to be down on huffing gasoline. I think that's okay.
But I'm just saying that I think it's all misplaced, right? And I don't think that people even realize it. And if they did get exposure to the arts, then maybe some of those, some of that would go in that direction. Because if you get into creative things, then it's just like people talk about the runner's high, you get a creative high. It's all these things that are a little bit more natural that get your dopamine flowing rather than using other means. Right. So I think that is something that your average person, I would say, doesn't really think about too much. They're like, oh, why would I want to do that? Because, what's the point of it? Well, this is the point. The point is to spark your brain. And that's what you're doing with these other things. You're just trying to either get it to function differently or function less if you are perseverating on your problems. And that's what you're doing. But these other things can do that. Exercise can do that. Creativity can do that. All these things can have the same effect.
Yeah,
if you're exposed to them.
You're totally right. And, on the flip side of that, of course, that's why you see a lot of creative people also descend into great addiction.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
Writers, for instance, always have there's obviously like William Faulkner. I went to William Faulkner's house. He's only a few hours away from me. He's not living anymore. He doesn't live there anymore. He's dead, but you can walk through his house and sees, it's a museum. But in that house, they have several monuments to William Faulkner's alcohol and alcoholism and his addiction to tobacco.
Yeah.
And this quote by him that's like, all artists have tools of their trade. I find that mine is like a little bit of a little shot of bourbon and a pipe. And I thought that was like, I wonder how many writers have come through this house and then just like immediately gone down to like the corner liquor store and gotten like some bullet bourbon and a cigar.
They sell it at the gift shop.
I know they should. I mean, it's unfortunately become part of this romanticism about artists that they are generally very self-destructive. Some of them incredibly abusive people, but a lot of that also stems from this idea that like art is incredibly hard because you're sitting down and you're creating something even if it's within a well-established medium. There's never been an artist who's lived who hasn't sat down hoping to create the something that's never been created before on a piece of paper or on a canvas. And so they grapple with the idea that like they're not going to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And it leads into this thing where it's like, oh, screw it, I'll just go and like drink and and huff gasoline. And that. And
I shouldn't have brought that up. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I think it's okay that we say it as many times as we can. And with the
huffing is the cheapest high you can get, everybody.
I mean, just look outside. Well, maybe not so much anymore because a lot of cars out there are electric, but you can easily, like go down the road, just open up gas tanks and just get a good
can of spray paint. Doesn't cost much, and it comes with its own plastic bag, so you're all set.
No. So I think you're right. Like many people do suffer addictions, but they also just become really incredibly insufferable people if they have no idea whatsoever that art exists out there for some kind of medium. But I will say at the same time, a lot of the happiest people I know are some of the are people who have I've talked to who have like never sat down and tried to write an original sentence, who have never sat down and actually tried to even like really read a book seriously. These are very, very happy people who are content to follow the same cycle of routine year in and year out.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that they're just dullards, but they get a lot of, enthusiasm, a lot of fulfillment from things that I just never could imagine,
right.
And they could easily say the same thing as like, why is he so depressed? Hasn't he ever watched an Alabama football game?
Well, there's certainly a lot of those fans.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's like, it comes down to like, everybody has their own thing, but I definitely, that's my ultimate argument. What kind of got me started down this is the idea that, people are just always up in arms about like why you need to go to school to like do a creative writing program, do like an MFA, or, go to school to learn how to do, this or that in arts and theater and everything. And I just think the simple fact of the matter is that like, in order to, art has this transformative experience. It can genuinely change people. And in order to really do that, you have to, be a student of it. You have to know how to do it well. And that really does start for a lot of people, who need that discipline, who aren't just like, automatic geniuses just by virtue of, being born. That it's like we do need those programs. We do need that.
Yeah. The issue, you want to be an electrician, you got to, do an apprenticeship somewhere. So
yeah,
any trade or any skill that you're going to pick up, you have to practice. And that's what that's all about. There's no difference. It's just, yes, it's not, as concrete perhaps as those are, but it's still a skill that can be developed. And, people develop it. They got to practice, got to do things, got to stretch,
Now, I will say that when I was doing my master's program in English literature, I was greatly grappling with the idea every single day of like, why is what I do like important? What importance does this have to anybody else outside the academic community? And that is a big danger that exists where you get into college and you become part of this like perpetual, academic bubble. And it's like all the work that you're doing is basically just designed to be seen by other academics. And that's one of those things that I do seriously, grapple with, because I'm at this transition where, I can apply to go get my dissertation, to become a PhD, but I still haven't answered that question for myself. Like, how would this be any kind of transformative experience for anybody outside of the academic, bubble? And that is a little bit, concerning to me, is that whatever knowledge you need to eventually break out of it, and it needs to you need to like impact other people who didn't go to school for all that time and are able to interpret your work without having to go through the same program as you. So
right. Well, that's interesting that you say that, but I think much like everything, you never really know what your influence is, right? So you always assume your influence is very small. And you some people never find out, and then some people do find out, oh, my influence was much broader than I thought it was. And so even if it is just academic and you're like, the only real feedback you get is from the academic community, chances are that it will bleed out of that into something else. You'll just never be aware of it.
You're right. And it's the dream. And I think a lot of academics are probably afraid to admit this, but it is the ultimate dream of any academic to break into the popular circle, to like write a book, like, this is a bad example because he's not really an academic, but Malcolm Gladwell, to get to that level where you're writing these smart intellectual books that everybody reads. It's very, very rare for academics to do that. But I was listening to like a podcast today about William F. Buckley, and he was one of the guys who did that. He kind of started the entire conservative movement, being an academic intellectual who was actually broke out of that.
Right.
Break out of those circles.
I'm trying to think of my William F. Buckley impersonation. Wasn't he the one to talk like this or something like that?
It's somewhere between like George Plimpton and and Hal from 2001. Not really. I'm just trying to bring us back to what we started talking about. So
he sounds like an AI academic. No,
he does.
I'm William F. I'm actually thinking of Joe Flaherty on SCTV used to do a William F. Buckley impersonation, and he would tilt his head way back and look down his nose and talk like this and be like, and it was, I think, and then he would say something funny, but
no idea about who Barry Goldwater is. You insist.
Yeah, nobody's. A lot of these references are going to be gone fast, people. But
no, I mean, okay,
that's okay. Who cares?
Look up William F. Buckley, and I don't agree with him at all, but he's a fascinating figure. I mean, this guy who could like be on Johnny Carson along with like Muhammad Ali and like Don Rickles and like I mean, such a fascinating figure. Him, and there was a great documentary made about his debates with Gore Vidal. In the 1972, Republican and Democratic national conventions, which sounds incredibly boring, but I mean, oh my God, they're so fascinating. Anyway, okay, sorry.
That's okay. But it's all very interesting. But I think getting back to AI and so forth, and just talking about current AI, is unfortunately it is dulling, I think, the creative experience, because
Yeah.
I can type in literally a couple of sentences and get an article, right?
Yeah.
Write me an article about Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley at the 1972 convention, and AI will do it.
Right.
And it's killing. If that happens, then where, other than making that sentence, where are you at?
Well, one of the sad things about why so many students are getting away with it right now, because I listened to your podcast interview that you did with Lethal Venom a couple of
Oh,
weeks
did
ago.
you? What did I say?
No, he lives in the same state as I do, and he admitted on that podcast interview that he did with you
cheated
using Chat GPT.
Yeah.
And not calling it cheating, but it's so many students are able to get away with using AI and Chat GPT right now because they are taught so homogeneously how to write essays.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that is now really kind of the what's the expression? The chickens are coming home to roost,
Right.
Yeah, because I think teachers are really having to shake up the way that they teach composition now.
Mm-hmm.
I can easily tell when a student of mine uses AI, but a lot of, and I think most teachers can, but the only reasons what they're basically giving you when they give you like an AI essay right now about whatever version of machine learning we're in right now that has only been branded AI because the first, the Chat GPT came out as an open AI product, like the company called itself that, but it's not that.
Right.
Everybody mistook it for AI. So,
right. It doesn't, it learns basically at an accelerated rate on the material that's put into it.
Right.
There's not going to be any big leaps currently with the way that it works.
Right.
And I thought I saw an interesting, just thumbing through socials and whatnot. I saw an interesting video over in China. They have an AI soccer match with robots that they do every year, and it's or maybe more than that. But I saw this thing where they did it, and I thought it was very interesting because, and this is something that in robotics they've been trying to do for decades, is to get these robots to be able to function in a certain way, like play soccer, without just falling down constantly, and have some strategy, right? So they're AI controlled, so they're not remote controlled, so they have to come up with the strategy based on whatever programming they've got, and then have to function as robots and move around the field and so forth. But if you watch the video, each one of the robots has a strap on the back of their neck, because there's these guys that just go out on the field and pick them up when they fall over each other like children. And I thought it was hilarious because they've come up with a solution to what is an obvious problem in the fact that these robots get tangled up and knock each other over. And rather than grabbing them, randomly, they've installed a strap on every one of them so that they can just reach down, pick it up, set it up on its feet, and get it going again. And to me, that is that's AI right now.
Right.
That is total visual and exemplification of what AI is. It's something that falls down a lot, and we implement a solution of a strap that picks it up and puts it back on its feet.
You're right. But, just the very idea, though, that you're holding that is analogous to watching children, play the game.
Yeah.
It's something because, it's not socially acceptable to, laugh at babies falling over, but, well, yeah. Bob Saget kind of made a career out of that. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's not the best thing.
But only if they don't get hurt. If they get hurt, then you got to be,
But just the fact that we are in that phase right now where we are, it is a toddler. And the fact that they're out there and they're confident enough to actually put some of that, have them do that at this point, means that it will eventually get better and pretty soon you won't need the training wheels or the straps or whatever on it.
Right. Yeah. The straps will be useless and they'll take them off.
I know. I just hope by that point, we've figured out some, system of checks and balances in place. But I don't know. I just think, going back to the idea of science fiction, I came home tonight from work and my wife was watching Jurassic Park. And, of course, I've seen this movie so many times. I can't even count how many times I've seen that movie now.
Mm-hmm.
But it continues to just be like such a great, I know Pandora's box is already a metaphor, but it is a metaphor for just like the idea of like unchecked, unregulated technology that, yeah, we could do this, but should we do this? So much of what we've been given since, let's say like 1994 has been so unregulated to the point where it's literally changed everything about the way that we think and the way that we treat each other. And, obviously first it was, the internet and internet dating. I really kind of attribute to like, the downfall of like all society. Even though it's led to, I'm sure, like a lot of great relationships, it has led to this like commodification of the most important unique trait that we have as human beings. But after that, I mean, social media, came along. That was like just something that just completely changed the way that we think about how we interact with the world, not regulated almost at all. Now we have obviously like artificial intelligence or LLM, chat GPT, whatever you want to call it, Suno AI, all these companies that are just, springing from the box like snakes, and just like no idea where they're going to stop. And there's just, like I said, like going all the way back 30 years, there's just nobody there to regulate any of it because there's so much money flying around in the air. And it's also moving so fast that just nobody knows like the vocabulary to be able to talk to Silicon Valley, much less just has the inclination to talk to them. So
last time I think we talked, I came up with some weird idea about I'll buy that for $1. And this time your statements there made me think of another one. And so, we are commoditized as internet users, right? That's been the whole progression over these last 20 some years, 30 years, is to make us the commodity, right? They all want our attention, and they're using our attention to make themselves money. And now if you notice on a lot of the social media, they'll have an AI social media channel to make yourself money, right? So we need to flip the script, and we need to be commoditizing ourselves to say, if you want my attention, you have to pay me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it can't go on this way. At some point, there's going to be so much AI on the internet that who your viewers are, and if they're not human, then they don't count.
Yeah.
And so we need to flip the script and say, I'm a viewer. I'm, somebody can interact, but you got to pay me to interact with me.
In a way, there's like a thing of that's already going on now, where it's like you see like no shortage of websites now that are saying like, we'll pay you to shop. They're essentially saying, we'll pay you to go to this website that you've never heard of that operates out of Bangladesh and buy a bunch of their stuff for cheap.
Temu.
Yeah. And I mean, that's already happening, to a certain degree, but the best thing that people can do right now, honestly, is just to completely, as soon as they see anything whatsoever, that has an AI component, the first moment they suspect it, just like immediately like swipe up on it, swipe left on it, unfollow it, whatever. I know it's like, it's playing whack-a-mole,
right. I mean, how? I mean, the other thing is, what if it's giving you information you want?
Yeah, but what really truly is like, so, and John Oliver on his HBO show did a good bit about AI a couple weeks ago. What is really scary right now is that it's genuinely like actually kind of destroying people's like entire business models that they've built on the internet over years and years, like Etsy, for instance, and Pinterest. These people who have it may have not been like a very stable living to begin with, but they've nevertheless been able to eke out, an existence, a living off of some of these websites. And now when you go to them, like Pinterest is like 85% AI generated image, no matter what you search for. Etsy is the same thing. And it's just because like people recognize exactly what's going on right now, where, Google and Facebook are not going to regulate at all people who are going on and just doing these fly-by-night courses on how to teaching people on how to like make money with AI by exploiting Pinterest and Etsy and YouTube loopholes, and so it's actually wrecking and just destroying really the experience that a lot of people, the relationship a lot of people have built with the internet, for the last 20 some odd years.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's progress. You constantly, constantly building and rebuilding and tearing down and rebuilding, and it happens in real estate where you're in Birmingham. It's a bigger city.
Yeah,
you've got a downtown area that probably has been raised and rebuilt.
Yeah, that's
tens of 12s of times,
Yeah, and that's a great argument. That's a great rebut. I mean, totally. And I get that there is something to be said about progress, but there's also something to be said about like unchecked, unregulated progress. And what we've done with real estate in America is like, and we haven't perfected it whatsoever. But and depending on where you live, it's one thing versus another. And some places it may be really, really good, and other places really bad. But like, we have zoning boards, nevertheless. Like we don't have something like that for AI. We do have people who step in because they see some kind of a political advantage to saying no to unchecked progress.
Right.
That's just not happening right now in the world of AI.
And well, because the other problem is because it's just not. You said political advantage. There's no political advantage to it right now.
Oh yeah, no, there's not. I mean, because for one, like we have established, they don't understand it, and for two, like where is the, like what is the bright side right now for pissing off Silicon Valley? Where is the bright side right now for pissing off Mark Zuckerberg, who continues to fail over and over and over again? Still manages to make the most seasoned, Congress people like piss their pants,
Right.
It's absolutely laughable how much he has failed at everything he's ever done. And like how just he continues to just copy and imitate all these other companies that have a great idea, that if he can't buy them, he just basically just reshapes the business model to be what they are.
Threads.
I know, and it's so embarrassing. But the thing about it is, he was there first, and he's got more money, to prove to everyone else that he's gonna continue to do it. So,
it's unfortunate, but to be honest with you, if you think about, you name a tech giant, and I'll tell you that they stole whatever they are known for.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I mean,
Jobs stole the Mac from Xerox.
Yeah,
they didn't go anywhere.
Bill Gates
stole DOS from Gary Kildall.
Yeah,
who was an academic in Washington.
Yeah,
it goes on and on and on. I mean, almost none of these people have had. They may have had original thoughts, but that's not the thing that made them rich.
Except Edison. Edison always had original thoughts. Everything that he did was by himself.
No, he didn't.
Alone by himself. Yes. Read my 4th grade history textbook. That's exactly what you'll see. and
Yeah, I know,
count
because
my fourth grade
yeah, well,
this-
because that's the same thing that when Zuckerberg puts out the textbooks, he'll be the one that has it, because that's what Edison did. Because the whole reason Tesla left Edison was because he kept taking all his ideas.
But again, like this is one of the reasons though that it all really does come back to education, because the idea of like, you know, that has the number one biggest myth that has led us into where we are right now is just this myth of disruption. And no, it's not disruption, it's just outright stealing. You know,
Yeah.
you're a marketer, you're a style over substance person, you are a style person who goes and steals from the substance person. That's the timeline of history, and it's not something at all that we learn, you know, growing up at all. We always learn about, because it's much easier, and those textbooks cost a lot to manufacture, so the fewer pages they have, the better. If you could just like, okay, so like take all those things that all those people working in Menlo Park did and just make it Edison. Just like, we don't need to go into all the backstory of all of his assistants.
Yeah, he had I mean, dozens of people working for him, and he put his name on everything.
I know.
But and in a way, bringing it back to our topic, that's what AI is doing. It is taking what everybody else has created and making it its own.
Yeah.
And that's where people get mad about it. And you know, now I'm going to inject a little bit of, you know, my own experience, right? So podcasting. So literally, if you find static radio anywhere but static radio, it has been stolen.
Oh, really?
Because I've given actually one aggregator permission to put the show on their aggregator. Oddly enough, was Amazon. They're the only one that asked.
Yeah.
Including iTunes.
Wow. Really?
Because we were on iTunes when it launched.
Right.
Because we were one of the few doing this. And yeah, I found out that we were on iTunes by somebody who was listening. And they told me we were on iTunes. I had no idea.
So it wasn't caught by like a podcatcher, like an aggregator, and put on.
Yeah,
there?
no, it was grabbed. But I'm just saying that there was nobody. The only person who's ever reached out and said, "Hey, can we put this on our list?" is Amazon.
Huh?
Because they sent me an email and said, "We're going to do Amazon Music. We're going to have podcasts. Would you like to have your podcast in there?"
Okay.
And I said, sure. Every other one, no one has ever, I mean, all this technology exists. It now at this point in time, every podcast has an email associated with it when in your feed.
Right.
And always has since the beginning of RSS.
Yeah.
So it's easy to contact people, but they don't. And so I'm not really saying stealing, because it's the quid pro quo, right? So you have to be out there in order for people to find you, and so forth. But if you really look at it, it's like they have a way to ask your permission, just like the same way that AI, the people who are doing AI, could ask everybody's permission to use their content, but they didn't.
Right. Man.
And at this point, your stuff, my stuff, anybody else's stuff who's created anything and put it on the internet is in that large language model.
I think that's I'm starting to see like a lot more on Substack, people actually, like, from big writers to small writers, like, people putting a disclaimer like no part of this article can be used in the training of LLMs. And I don't think that works.
No, it doesn't work.
I'm not, people just started doing it, I assume, as a form of protest, but
yeah,
but that right there is, creepy, obviously, because I think they're using like the same model as like, well, if you're on the internet, you're going to show up in a Google search. So why not? You can also show up in somebody's AI search quotes. That's what they're thinking of it as.
Right.
They're not thinking of it as like, we're stealing your proprietary stuff and putting it on there regardless of what kind of license that you have. Like I've always released my stuff under a Creative Commons. So anybody can have it, but like the idea is that like I at least need you to attribute it. Right. Uh, but anything that I put out there right now, I mean, could ideally, could be seized to train, and that's not the way it's supposed to work at all.
No.
GPT is not a Google search. It's
So-
something that actually uses what I do to create stuff that I don't know about. So,
and unfortunately, we're repeating the same thing. You talk about Zuckerberg's got so much money.
mhm.
He can do whatever he wants because of that, and so forth. And that's the same thing that's happening. And so it happens again and again and again, and it's happened, infinitely over time, where basically, those who have the power then can abuse that power. They'll be like, well, you should, Apple would probably say, you should be happy we listed you on iTunes, And it's like, well, I don't know if I'm happy about that. But there's easy ways to communicate. We have never in the history of our lives, of anybody's life, had an easier time communicating with people that we don't even know, or would never meet, or geographically dispersed than now. And yet we, as a society, and in these situations like we're talking about, still don't use it.
Right.
And I mean, it's baffling that is happening, because why was it invented? Why did we do all this if we're not going to utilize it to its fullest potential? Oh, well, we're kind of like, I hate to throw this in there, but we're Easter Christmas Catholics. Everything's good in the world because we go twice a year.
around the time of the .com bubble, I think we started to realize that, like, oh, this isn't what we invented this for, easy communication, giving people in third world countries access to information, so that they could sort of have a little bit of power and propriety over their knowledge. What we really created this whole thing for is just to make money really, really quickly.
That's right.
So and I've never, honestly, I hate to say it, but I've never had any illusions, because I grew up, with the internet, I'm 42 now, and I was, I think, maybe 9 years old when I first got online. So I've never viewed it, except for maybe like those early years, when I was on AOL.
You've got mail.
Yeah. I mean, as anything other than just like this opportunity to make money. And that's why I got into podcasting initially, because it's like I needed something, like I just wanted to do something that I enjoyed doing and possibly make money for it, and found out very, very quickly. And it became like very ideological about it, as the fact that, like, as soon as I start making money from this thing, it'll be like a job,
right?
Not necessarily something that's fun to me. Now, I still don't harbor any illusions about the fact that, like, someday some miracle could happen that could allow me to make money off of it. Like, I'm not dogmatic about it as much as I used to be, but the thing about it is, though, is that it is true. It's like communication kind of comes first. The creative aspect, the ability to actually, like, share with people that you would never get to meet ever. Like your ideas, your thoughts, your, like, what you do and what you're interested in. That's incredibly, powerful, and just something that never has escaped me for once, as long as I've been using the internet. But I also believe that, like, most people don't think that way. Most people look at the internet and they're like, how can I make millions of dollars off of this without ever having to go into an office?
Right. That's right. Without actually working. That's what I want. Yeah. And AI is going to do this for me.
Yeah, I know. And that's why you have websites like, Pinterest and Etsy, that have been, overflowing with people with AI artwork. Because these people are literally going on and just, like, typing in a quick prompt, and and it's destroying these platforms that were once sort of like these, safe havens for, like, creative people on the internet.
Right.
And Substack is really scary, and we've talked about Substack in the past, because I've really adopted Substack as something that I really do enjoy quite a lot. But AI hasn't so much destroyed Substack at all. It hasn't really crept in there. I think they're really good about it. What AI has really done to Substack is it's turned all these people who I once really enjoyed reading into just anti-AI evangelist. Really, really annoying about it right now.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just irritating to me. And it's like it feels like Lenny Bruce in like the late 60s or something. It's like, stop ranting about the things that are keeping you down, and just like,
Right.
you know, it's bothersome. It's a little annoying.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, you know, now's the time, right? So
Yeah, and you got to have that. I know exactly what you mean. It's just like just constant stream after stream after stream, and like I generally, whenever I see somebody on Substack that comes up that I don't follow, and they've just got this long rant about AI, I usually unfollow them because I just don't want to see that. You know, I just it's because it's the same rant over and over again, and I know it's like a lot of it is probably the rant I gave here, but that's the difference between spoken word and you know, and text. Is that spoken word, it's like it just, you know, it's more improvisational, you know.
right. It flows a little bit there.
Spend all of my time, you know, sitting down, like writing an article about why AI sucks, you know. But you know, it's but I don't know. I do have like a lot of hope, as long as like I think it is very important. I think that that's like the best thing you can do, is like every time you see anything that you like even remotely believe is AI, just get past it, you know, just move. Just I don't know. I mean, teach the algorithm well, you know, and
Yeah.
and just do that, and maybe that'll do something. But other than that, I don't really know what we can do about it.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is happened and will happen all at the same time, I think.
Yeah.
That's the weird part about it. But the interesting thing is, now we're going to loop back to the movie for just a little bit here, is that the funny thing is in the movie we have this, you know, child's toy that's wandering around, you know, meeting all of these other, you know, variations. And like we said, they were kind of, you know, disposable beings at this point, um, not repurposed, right? There's no reason that little Haley Joel Osment couldn't do badge a minute and put a bunch of badges together for somebody. You know, it really is an interesting allegory for our consumer society, that we can't get past what things are made for. And then once we don't need them anymore, we just cast them aside, even though they're probably useful in some way, shape, or form in another, you know, in another configuration.
Yeah. So you're talking about the idea of like, you know, we kind of use something and just immediate, like a plastic bottle, and we just throw it away in like the regular fashion. Just, yeah. I mean, no, yeah, I think the movie does say that. And as I recall, there are scenes in the movie that take place amid large piles of trash.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm thinking about the Wall-E again.
Well, I think it's trash, but I think it's just because they're not, because they're you know, essentially they're treated like poor, right?
Yeah.
Economically challenged, however you want to say it. And so then they have to live at the edges of society.
Right. And just kind of cast off, and you know, like marginalized. And you know, again, I don't know how much of this is Kubrick and how much of it is Spielberg. And I like to think that part of it's Kubrick, and the idea that, like, you know, he is always interested in what happens to people when they sort of like lose their purpose. And you know, he does, you know, like Clockwork Orange does this a lot, just as much. Like, you might think of like the kid in AI as being like a, you know, a spawn of like Alex from of just being like this thing that just like literally has nothing to do all day long and like roam around, and you know, with just this like single solitary purpose that he's been programmed to do, with like nobody there to claim him.
Right.
And, yeah, again, that is like very much a metaphor for, you know, just this you know, like commodification of things, this like a, you know, objectification that we place on on certain things, and I'm trying to think of like a certain word here. This disposability that we have, like just this instant disposability, and like this, you know, fast fashion, and I guess like he's a fast robot in that movie, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's weird. It is weird. It's so weird to think about all that. And I mean, the terrible part is we're kind of headed down that road. I mean, that's the only good thing right now for as far as artificial intelligence is it's all digital, and so whenever you turn the power off, it kind of disappears.
Right.
Whereas this is the embodiment of, you know, a product that doesn't disappear. You know, there's remnants, just like our garbage.
Why do they
that
get
will always be left?
So have you watched the movie recently? Did you watch it in preparation for this?
No, I was trying to, but I did not get a chance to do it. But I've watched it. Well, shoot, who knows how long ago it's been? But yeah, I've watched it.
I would have felt so bad if you watched it and you were all prepared to talk about it. And I'm like, I think I saw it 5 years ago. So I'm glad. Okay, so I'm trying to remember what the whole isn't it like the thing where it's like their kid is in a coma, like the people who get the AI, their kid is in a coma or something, and they get the AI to sort of replace the experience of having a child. Is that
right? Yeah, it was the surrogate. Yeah,
yeah, and then the kid wakes up and they're like, okay, we no longer need you anymore.
We don't need this anymore.
Like, through those parents, and it's like I can't remember how the movie builds any sympathy for them at all, because I remember like the mom or a clone of the mom comes back at the end, and so, you know, the movie starts out from like this really, really dark place of just like all human beings are terrible, and they have this like, but it's like they don't get the robot. He's not like Judy from the Jetsons, where it's like he's like there to do chores for them all day. They have him to, you're right, like be a surrogate for a very real human purpose, to actually kind of like, you know, elicit this emotion of having a child.
And he bonds, you know, as a being, and then gets cast aside, you know. It's that's the sad, and then obviously it's very sad at the end, but you know, it's, and then he gets to go meet all these other robots that are kind of in similar predicaments as things go through. Yeah. And so it's you know, I haven't seen it recently, but I can remember most of it. At least I have moments of it that are stored in my memory that are pretty vivid. And unfortunately, I think that the structure was Kubrick, but I think a lot of it Spielberg altered to be more his style. And, you know, and so overall, even though I know Stanley Kubrick had worked on this and so forth, I don't know that there's, you know, there's fingerprints, but there's not, you know, much more than that on this movie.
With Kubrick's last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, you could see that by the end there, he was a pretty cynical bastard.
Well, I think he was all the way through. I mean, he literally did not leave England to make a Vietnam movie.
Yeah, I know. He just he just didn't like any of it. He was just one of those few filmmakers that just like had a lot of success early on, and for the rest of his career, he just like spent years and years making one movie. And
and he used the clout that he gained to do what he wanted.
You're right.
He didn't want to do things.
I know, but there's such a through line though in all of his movies that I think is totally artificial intelligence. You know, it's fascinating, because if you think about all of his movies, you know, you think about Lolita, for instance, which isn't like the first movie that comes to mind when you think about artificial intelligence. But like, you know, I don't know how recently you've seen that movie, but it's like one of my wife's favorite films.
Lolita. James Mason
and Peter Sellers, and as it's one of those movies where it's like, what is the primary thing that drives us and motivates us? It's like this like sexual desire, you know, this thing that like we can't control where that thing's going to go, you know, sometimes. like morals and natural human intuition for what is right and what is wrong, powers us through that, and allows us to avoid some of like the darker perversions that may come up, but it is a very much a kind of artificial intelligence, and the idea that like we do not control it. It is just like something that is there, and it's going to like lead us to do bad things if we're not careful with how we train it.
Right.
And you just go all the way, like Dr. Strangelove is all about the world ending because of, guess what, like this artificial intelligence device, this doomsday machine that's triggered to go off if a certain number of events happen in a certain sequence. And
takes the choices away.
Yeah, and all the way to like Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is all about just like you go to boot camp and you're turned into just this machine that just responds to command, and you have no humanity of your own. And man, it's like I just watched that 5-part Netflix documentary on the Vietnam War, and look at the My Lai massacre, and just like imagine, like, I mean, that Full Metal Jacket is like a straight up like My Lai massacre. It's just like these soldiers like who just have completely been robbed of all humanity, just like literally killing anything in sight based on the command that they've been given, that turned out to be a miscommunication.
Right.
It just is. But yeah, like I think it would make sense, like, just all of Kubrick's movies sort of involve that idea of like we're human beings, but we're also sort of machines ourselves, and we have these like thoughts and impulses that have to be very carefully trained by our human sides. But
it's wild though. I mean, I think that the more these kind of things happen and so forth, and we've spanned like almost all of cinema and some of the things that we've thrown out here tonight, but one thing remains is the inhumane, right? So Haley Joel gets treated poorly, Charlie Chaplin has to work constantly, and so forth, and it's weird that those themes keep repeating over and over and over again, in conjunction with technology, in conjunction with war. You said sexuality and Lolita and so forth, and it's like, wow, we're destined to never learn.
Yeah, I know. Well, again, it just all comes down to what you believe is the best, and how to, like, what you truly believe is in charge. Is like, do you have any kind of individuality over your own response to artificial intelligence, or any kind of technology that's given to you that makes your life a little bit easier? Are you able to control that, or is that being actually like enforced on you as a system of like, I have to adapt to this now or else I will die? And that's what's so scary right now, just being in the job market, is looking for jobs constantly. I'm constantly seeing jobs now in companies that are really afraid that they're going to be made obsolete if they don't adopt to AI. So now I have to adopt to AI.
Right.
That's a really scary thing, because like, what I'm having to essentially do right now is kind of to tweak my resume to say that like I'm open to like using like chat GPT systems and all that. And that doesn't happen so much in academia, but like in other like private sector jobs that I've been kind of applying for this summer, it very much is. I applied for this job the other day. I didn't want to, but it was like, whatever. It's like, it's a job that I can apply to very easily. They needed somebody to an AI prompt generator. They actually needed somebody to listen to an audiobook and type prompts into AI, like creative prompts that would get it to generate unique images to show people while they're reading the audiobook.
Seriously?
Can you believe that?
So they don't want to pay an artist, but they pay somebody money to do that.
Yeah, I mean, to write prompts. I mean, that's one of the things that I saw yesterday. So it's I It is. It's like it gets to this point where it's like I can have this response to AI, which is like to choose not to even entertain the idea of like looking at an AI image when the minute I see it and it looks suspiciously like AI, I just immediately like, get a, swipe up away from it. But it's also this point too, where, it's a buzzword in town right now. And like everybody's using it and everybody's expecting you to adapt to it or die, and that's the, pivot that we're at right now.
It's got to be terrible. I can't imagine. I can't imagine being in the job market right now. I mean, when I entered the job market, there were still classified ads. So
I'm glad that, the weird thing is like, it's tough, but I'm also glad because it's made me so incredibly grateful when I do get a job. I'm going to hold on to my job. Nothing else.
Maybe I was going to go the other way. I was going to say I was recently out and about and had a lovely walk through the forest. Right. I'm like, why can't we just do this every day? I mean, this is what we're meant to do. I mean, it was just so beautiful. The scenery was great. I felt good. I was walking. Everything was right with the world, and there was a feeling of calmness and contentedness and everything just by doing that. So to me, you don't get that in other parts of your life, and so it's like, wow, this is really something that people should be doing.
Yeah, of course,
regularly.
It did it all the time. I mean, it's like that line in Pulp Fiction, the people who just like walk the earth all day long, we call them bums, they're called bums, just if you walk through the woods all day long, I
think it's a good idea though. We should just walk through the woods all day long and be bums. It would be great.
No, I love, and I always like kind of love that idea of like, oh, I'm going to be that writer that just like sits in a cottage all day long and has my coffee brought to me and look out the window and there's a tree and I'm going to write about that tree and the birds that nest in that tree and all that. And, and it never really works out that way, and, it's like in that movie that's the exact same thing that happens in that Chevy Chase movie, Funny Farm.
Funny Farm, yeah,
he gets everything perfectly right. He's got like a little sparrow that nests outside, and like by the third day, he like opens the window and he throws the coffee on the birds.
Right.
Shut up.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens.
No, I think like woods are great, trees are great, nature's great, but I think at the end of the day, you need that suffering. You need that, sitting in 5 o'clock traffic. That's what fuels you to create great art. Picasso, for instance, sat in a lot of 5 o'clock traffic.
Yeah, but the funny thing is when you make it, you don't have to sit in 5 o'clock traffic anymore.
That's why so many artists, they just become so incredibly detached, I think. That's why, like, what's the last Stephen King novel you read? I know people who read a lot of Stephen King novels, but to me, it's like his best stuff was written when he was like living in a trailer and working at Dunkin' Donuts. It's
right.
Like I love, Carrie and Salem's Lot and, The Stand, and all those books were written when he had no money at all.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not saying he hasn't written anything good since then. He has, but it's just like, you
don't like any Richard Bachman stuff then,
huh? No, I like, The Running Man. Running Man.
Because by the time he was Richard Bachman, he was Stephen King.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know we're getting like way off the topic, and let me just shut me down whenever you want.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, but it does all relate, though. It does relate. I mean, like what we're talking about tonight is like this.
Well, I can go on to Claude and say, write me a Stephen King story.
Yeah, we can 100% stream. And people do, by the way, people do. You go on Amazon. Amazon is also being flooded right now by AI books.
Yeah.
And, it's just, and unfortunately, so many, and I know I sound like a snob when I say like people don't read books, but it is a fact, like 73% of people polled like haven't admitted to not having read a book. And that's crazy because usually it should be like less than that, because usually when people don't read books, they lie about it, but people were like perfectly open and willing to saying that they don't read books. And you know, when you're not reading books and then you like look at an AI book, you're not going to know the freaking difference, you know?
Oh no, most people aren't gonna know or care.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
yeah. But I mean, you know, so much of a part of like what I enjoy when I've been reading like a lot of books, you know, this summer, because like it's what I just do when I'm unemployed. You know, just wake up in the morning and like read your books. And I love reading like older books and classic books, and you know, and just thinking about the idea like this is somebody's thought, you know, this is somebody sat down and like, you know, 1961, you know, at like a typewriter, and just had a thought that day, and they wrote it down, and they put all these thoughts together, and here it is. And now I'm reading like a Thomas Pynchon book. And even though Thomas Pynchon is still alive, he's not the same person he was, you know, in like 1961. And people like, you know, Jane Austen and Wilkie Collins, you know, they're all dead. So, but we have their thoughts. We have like what was actually on their minds and what they were thinking all those years ago. And we have this like amazing, just books are just like this amazing access to like human experience that you know, it just that we're able to get, and it's just so crystallized and it's fresh. And it's one of those things that's just like incredibly devalued by a lot of the students that I teach, and even a lot of the teachers that I work with. Not so much in the English department at the university, like they all read, but you know, but secondary school teachers that I've worked with in the past who just like don't read, and yet they're teaching they're reading books with their students, you know?
Well, it's their job.
Yeah, it is their job. I know, but it's also like, you know, something they should be passionate about. It's like, I mean, you know, like one of the things that when I was teaching high school, it's like I would have to read, you know, like The Great Gatsby with my students, which I love The Great Gatsby, you know, but I've read it many, many times, you know, but I would go home that day and I would read another book, like an actual new book that I'd never read before, you know, because it's just one of those things that I like to do, that I just like greatly find a lot of you know, thrill from, that I don't really get from like, I'm not a big art person in terms of like looking at art, you know, and all that. And I don't get the same exact kind of connection to like the breadth of human experience as I get from like when I read a book. And I know that I'm sounding like incredibly like William F. Buckley right now. But
you're looking down your nose at us.
I know, I'm very read. I'm not, I know. And it's like, and believe me, I've got friends, you know, who like, you know, just get really annoyed whenever I talk about books, but, you know,
well, it's, you know, you don't need, technology. The technology to read a book is simple.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. I think that's why I enjoy it so much, you know?
Yeah.
But I think, first and foremost though, I am movies, you know, I am movies. I love movies. But you know, one of the things that just is so enjoyable about, you know, maybe not so much AI, because I only saw that movie once, but yeah, like movies like all of Stanley Kubrick stuff and all that, is that just, it's so rare, you know, that you go and, because the history of movies only goes back like 100 years, a little bit more,
right? A little bit more, yeah.
You know, but with books, you've got centuries and centuries of great books that that will always be there, that you can always read, and you know, you'll always discover more. But movies, because there's such a small barrier to entry for them, and they've been around so few, not very long at all. When you have a very, very, very small catalog of movies that you can look at and just like watch them over and over and over again for a number of years and still discover new things about them. And, you know, that's like what I get like with 2001, for instance, you know? Yeah. But
it may be AI if you watch it again.
Maybe so. I love how that miscommunication in our email has like absolutely haunted this chat. You know, I love it.
It's great though. I mean, I think it's funny.
No, believe me, I have an AI evangelist, the movie, the AI, the movie evangelist, friend that I've known for a very long time, that just like keeps saying, you need to watch that movie again. And he was saying a while back, you know, like I showed that to a girl, and you know, they didn't see, they stopped seeing each other very short.
I showed it to a girl, and then we got married and had a kid, and then we wanted to get a robot kid.
No, but he showed it to like a girl on one of his dates with her. You know, like she came over and they sat on the couch and he put on AI. You know, and, it didn't last very long after that.
Well, maybe it's a litmus test.
Well, maybe it is, or maybe you just watch Dirty Dancing and like get lucky or something that night, you know. But AI doesn't exactly, you know.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Well, Jude Law. Who knows?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna put on a movie with a guy who's much better looking than I am.
He's a gigolo. He's a gigolo in the movie, even. So there you go.
I do like Jude Law. I do remember he was in that. That was one of his early movies. Yeah. I do
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, that's funny. Well, as we wrap up here, because we've gone, you know, all over the place.
Yeah.
Let me do my litany of where to find Mike. So Midnight Citizen, that's Mike, believe it or not, at Midnight Citizen Podcast. And then you can read more at mikesbonfire.substack.com.
Yeah.
And thanks, Mike, for talking to me, even though we both interpreted things differently, but that's the great thing about it, right?
No, I think this show is all over the place. But I will say some of my favorite podcasts are when people just go all over the place. They're a lot of fun because that's the nature of conversation. That's just how it goes.
It is. Yeah, that's the way it goes, doesn't it?
Yeah. So,
and if it was all on topic, then it wouldn't be a conversation.
Of course not. We tried really, really hard to keep it on topic, though. I will say
a little bit.
Yeah, we did. I'm just a little loopy today. You have to understand, I've been working since like 8 o'clock this morning, and I came home, jumped right on this call, and I'm talking to a cat right now.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so
I'm in a fever dream.
Yeah, I think I am. I may wake up in the middle of the night and just like think that I just hallucinated all this. It's very possible.
Isn't it great though?
For anybody listening on audio, Bob is a cat always. I've never seen Bob's real face. No idea. He could be an AI. I
could be. Yeah. Although let me think. I'll have to do a query and say, what would an AI say whenever they don't know what to say? And then I can start saying those things so that everybody wonders what's going on. Yep. So how was your day? That way I'll say, that's fantastic. I'm glad that worked. How was your day? That'll be my comeback for anything that goes off the range that I don't know what it's about. I'll just say that.
Exactly.
Always goes home because they've made AI so polite that it's ridiculous. Whenever you're typing things in, I always like to tell them they're wrong. I've decided now, if I'm using it for anything and it comes back with something, I go, that's wrong. I do. And then it comes back and it says, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I was wrong. And then it gives me another answer.
So you enjoy gaslighting AI is what you're saying?
No, I mean, they're really wrong. And then I tell them. I'm being honest with them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I like to, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use it to help me with Excel spreadsheets to do formulas and things. Like, I don't want to think that hard. And so I'll say, I want to make a formula of this. And then it comes back with an answer. And I'm like, that is wrong. I can tell you, I can look at it and say that is wrong, even though I don't know exactly how to put it together. But whenever they come up and I go, that is wrong. And then, redo it. And then it comes back with the right answer.
Okay. It's
purposefully wrong because it should not come up with a wrong answer.
Yeah. Right.
So what's going on anyway? That could be a whole other discussion. Why is AI so wrong all the time?
Because it's trying to learn from you. I mean, it's collecting your data as it's giving you data, I think.
It could be, yeah. It's gaslighting me, Mike.
Yeah, you're right. The other way around. I know, exactly. I know.
It's pulling information from me.
You're right. You're right.
So, but anyway, everybody go listen to Midnight Citizen. He'll be live on YouTube sometimes.
Yeah, no, I've been doing
Saturdays, right?
I've been doing live shows every Saturday night.
Yeah,
Usually starting around 11 Central Standard Time. And,
late.
yeah, pretty late. But I've had some people drop in and join. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, if I could stay awake that late, maybe I'd join you.
I can barely stay away but that's kind of what makes it fun, though. You know, that's what makes it fun. I start very lucid, and then by the end of the show, usually go almost 2 hours. I'm usually pretty like out of it by that point. But that's
there
kind
you
of
go.
fun. You know, it's the whole idea of the show, I think. So
There you go.
yeah.
Well, everybody go listen, and we'll see you next time. Maybe we'll pick another topic next time that maybe is a little more concrete to both of us.
Yeah. That's good. Bye.
All right.
You